Okay, I'm going to try that again. I think I'm in the right room. Can somebody here confirm that they are interested in talking about Lakeshore design and they can hear me? Okay, thank you, Bridget.
Yes.
Um, thank you. Okay, let me get my slides up and ready, and I will share. Another thumbs up would be appreciated if you can see what I'm displaying. Perfect. Okay, Bridget, thank you. Thanks, Laura and Jess. So again, I'm Patrick Hurley. I work for both the Memphremagog Watershed Association and as an independent consultant, providing various environmental services for folks in Vermont. This talk is mostly about how to develop your own set of plans for a lakeshore project. How to think about things so that you have the appropriate information for regulatory review and permit applications. How to present information, kind of like the baseline documentation, site survey you should be conducting at the outset of the project, and then a little example of some work we did on Shadow Lake on a lakeshore slash kind of residential stormwater management project. So the project types can be quite varied, right? We talk a lot about soil lifts and kind of shallow bank stabilization today, but this example here is from Memphremagog, about a mile up the lake from where I live, and we got an 18-foot bank that's just naturally falling into the lake. So it's important to distinguish between what is natural erosion and what may be accelerated by disturbance or development. So understanding your site is important, and understanding like the alternatives and options you have to work with for design and engineering are equally important. I do want to just give a disclaimer. I am not a licensed engineer. I'm a hydrologist. I have a background in working for engineering firms, but I do take great care to determine which projects are within my wheelhouse in terms of risk and liabilities and which are not and should be designed and developed by licensed engineers and practicing geotechnical experts. So make sure you don't get yourself in over your head. Start small and build your experience as you gain it. So okay. Still going through. So first thing I do, if I've been invited to look at a problem, whether it's come from a lake-wise assessment or an LWAP assessment or just a cold call through the Watershed Group or through my business, is you got to get out there and you got to really understand the site. It's helpful to spend a few hours or minutes talking with the landowner, but make sure you reserve yourself a good couple hours to do a real thorough site assessment, site survey. So sometimes this can just be, taking a printout of the LiDAR or the aerial imagery and making yourself a doodle for a site survey sketch, just so you can really get kind of the ground conditions from above. But sometimes you need some, real data, some real survey information. So you can do that with a pretty inexpensive auto level, laser level, depending on what you're used to using. Some sites are more complex and they might require, total station or in this case, RTK GPS. And so we really lean on our instruments and our technology and kind of modern surveying tools because that's what is being expected of us in the permitting and design realm for whether it's grants or private clients. Got to have clear, clean information for people to review and evaluate. Some things you really want to capture when you're out there, particularly for a lake project, is you got to get that ordinary high water mark. If you don't know how to identify that, the Army Corps just put out a great resource. It's several hundred pages long. You could spend all weekend reading it about essentially delineating the ordinary high in different waterways and in different settings and regions. DEC also wants to see low water mark. That's important for determining whether or not you need a lakeshore encroachment permit. Ordinary high water mark is also really important for the Army Corps, obviously. I often get water surface elevation at that day because it's important to understand, are we dealing with high water? Is this low water? What was the recent rain activity? Has the lake come up a bunch? Is there dam operations? Because if there's a lot of fluctuation in the water level, you have an ability to compare your design, your site assessment water level, day with what might be expected at high water level or low water level, depending on the dam management. Don't short yourself on time for identifying like existing utilities, buried gas, buried electric, septic, cable. Look up, look down, walk the perimeter of the lake house looking for hookups, buried power, buried gas or propane. Map it out as best you can. Not only is it going to look professional, it will also save you potentially disastrous complications. Your contractor will greatly appreciate it. I think it's important to, make it clear that, you may have not done a full, thorough utility locate, but, on certain jobs, we hire a private utility locate service to come out and paint and mark, because DigSafe is great, but they're not going to find those landowner installed jobs, those small time contractor installed service lines. They really only deal with like from the power pole to the house or from the buried gas line to the house. They're not going to really, they might find fiber optic, but they're not really going to find, something that was installed by a homeowner or a handyman. Make sure you take note of where water's coming from off the roofs. Look for culverts from the driveways, look for gutters off the porches and the roofs. Start thinking about where you can put that water, how you can convey it, where it can go. As I mentioned earlier, surveys are important. If you're doing work on the shoreline itself, you're definitely going to want at least one representative cross-section. So often we do many more than one, depending on the length of the bank that you're working on. But make sure you extend that cross-section out into the lake a little ways so you understand the grade, the slope, topography, whatever, and also extend up the bank a little ways so you can capture some of the setback of the house or the recreational area or the cabin, whatever it might be. Really trying to learn your soils. I spent a lot of time digging holes, but soils are just one of those things where you'll never see the same pile of dirt. And so really get experience, texturing out soils, understanding how they react to erosive flows, to ice push, whether they frost heave, whether soils are shallow, sitting on 3 inches of dirt before bedrock. That happens a lot in Northeast Kingdom lakes. So you can't be designing infiltration practices if you've got a water table 3 inches below your feet or bedrock 3 inches below your feet. Meg Carter's been great on a couple of our jobs. She's got a real handy, good, strong hand for doodling and sketching. And so like getting an idea of the boundary of the tree line, existing vegetation, existing perennial beds, things you don't want to disturb, marking out potential access routes for equipment, edges of roads, driveways, sidewalks, all that stuff. If you can find property boundaries, try to key those into your map. You definitely don't want to be working on a neighbor's property if you don't have explicit permission. Map out if there's wetlands of concern that may be on the corner of the site or invasive species that could potentially spread. And oftentimes I find that the aerial imagery out there is not adequate enough for these really small lakeshore properties. So I'll hire someone like Fluid State to come out and fly a drone, or if we're working with the Watershed group, sometimes we can get some other partners like Conservation District or Fish and Wildlife to come out and take a few aerial snapshots for us. It really helps with developing a good plan set. And in terms of plan sets, you should really have a really clean, thorough existing conditions sheet at the start of your plan set. Give your reviewer, give your client, give your project partners, give your contractor a really clear picture of what is on the ground right now. What should we be aware of? So, we've got building perimeters, we've got property boundaries, we've got edge of roads, we've got driveways, we've got buried septic tank and its septic line. We've got a gas propane tank and a buried gas line. We've got a brook right here. Big old beautiful existing maple. We don't want to mess with her. She's a beautiful tree and we want to keep it there. We got a cedar hedge which really constricts the access to the site. Let's see. We've got contours. This job we actually did a full site survey because LiDAR around a lakeshore is kind of dicey. And so you got your edge of water, you got your ordinary high water mark, top of bank, toe of bank, all these sorts of things that are either going to be expected by the regulators or very handy for your contractors. Sometimes it really helps to have more than just a site plan for your existing conditions. So like if we're doing a shoreland project such as this one in Caspian, you really want to show what that looks like from a sectional perspective. So we'll include a couple existing condition sections for those target work areas, because take the time to make this clear. You know, you can see there's the deck of the house, there's a path, steep slope, terrible retaining wall, and then your ordinary high, your mean low. Call it out, because it's really worth taking the time. It shows existing conditions. It might show that, yeah, in fact, this site is extremely limited with access and potential restoration options. And so, like, encroaching in a lake is really the only thing we can do to grade this slope out and make it a little bit more stable and less erosive and less risky for a house and structure being so close. And then it's really nice because if you're working in CAD like I do, or Illustrator or SketchUp, whatever program you like, GIS is handy for some of this stuff. You essentially create your restoration plan, your concept plans on top of these existings, and you've got you know, kind of two birds with one stone in terms of the workflow. It's also worth note, if you have the ability, you know, you do want to look up, especially in these dam regular lakes, you could usually find the water surface elevation or mean low or mean high for, you know, FERC licensed dams. So sometimes I try to tie that in because it just shows that you're in agreement with, you know, LIDAR and lake management levels. So try to do a little bit of homework for that. Recently, Gabby Giannoni at MWA has really started diving into kind of photo renderings, which I think is a really neat way to communicate. Nobody wants to see a bunch of engineering plans when you're looking at a rain garden, for instance, or a beautification project that has water quality benefits. Holly Greenleaf does amazing photo rendering work and has done plenty for us. So I really encourage people to explore that. That's probably a little bit more accessible to most of us. You can take a photo like this and really start playing around with it in Canva or Adobe, and it really does provide a clear picture for those who might not be super technically savvy or used to reading, you know, design and engineering sets. So don't forget about the aesthetics. So this is a little bit of a case, you know, design case study. This is a house in Shadow Lake. It's literally hanging over the lake, so there's not really any shoreline to work on, but you can see this road is pretty high up above the house. You've got this steep driveway over here, and it just fills up with grit and silt, and when it rains, a lot of water comes down the shoulder and dumps right into the driveway. So they had reached out as through the Shadow Watershed Action Plan and the Orleans County Conservation District. Was working with landowners, brought in MWA to do some lakeshore design work, and we ultimately built this project this past summer with Northwoods and Osier Heights Excavating. And it was a great project. Landowners were really happy, and they said, take our driveway away. We don't want it. It's a pain in the butt. We hate backing out of it. It just turns into a waterfall in the rains, and we want to deal with it and not have all this water coming down our yard, you know, getting into like the sill of their house on their foundation and just causing havoc. You can see the driveway kind of took a turn and goes right down an asphalt path to the lake. So all that runoff, you know, it hits the front of the house and then it kind of snakes around and goes right to the lake. So it is a stormwater management problem. It's a drainage problem. It's a lack of lakeshore habitat problem. You know, this is all impervious surface. There's no habitat for critters there. But we've got, you know, some existing vegetation that we can kind of work our project into, and existing access that we can try to thread the needle and make it like a seamless transition. This project was nice because it didn't really need any permitting. You know, we didn't do any work on the adjacent brook behind those cedars. We didn't work below the ordinary high water mark. We are removing impervious surface, so nothing regulatory really got in the way of this project, and it was really fun. So our design's really focused on like, okay, we've got so much square footage to work with in terms of like an infiltration practice, biofiltration practice. We want to improve those access ramps. We don't want any paved paths anymore. We want infiltration steps. They help to slow down the water, infiltrate in the ground, trap sand and silt, and they're also safer in terms of walking, you know, in icy conditions rather than a sloping asphalt path that's full of rainwater all the time. So you can see this is just like an overlay of our existing conditions map with our proposed conditions. You've still got your utilities called out because those are really important. We don't want to cut through the asphalt as we're getting closer and closer to that septic tank. Nobody wants to deal with that. We want to make sure as we're building these steps that we are, as Meg says, archaeologically excavating that gas line, because she literally takes like a little garden trowel and a broom and pulls it out, you know, grain by grain, to make sure that we're not doing anything wrong. Fortunately, this landowner is actually a retired gas and propane plumber, so he was helpful in turning that off for us. But what we got here is trying to capture the runoff as it's coming off the driveway, send it through these infiltration planting beds, have infiltration steps, capture whatever wants to go down the path, and then again, anything that makes it out through the yard, we have these infiltration steps down to the lakeshore. Our conditions, again, I had an existing conditions for the section, I should say, an existing conditions section drawing for the driveway and ramps, and then we can just build from that our restoration plan. So from the top of the project at the roadway, the asphalt, water is going to come down into these timber stepped kind of planter beds, back, filled down to 3 feet with infiltration media like crushed stone, septic sand. There's an under drain at the bottom of this treatment system, or the bottom of this tier, which allows overflow to discharge safely. We kept the asphalt in front of the house just because we didn't want to mess with utilities. And then our infiltration steps down to the lake access point. So this is where you can call out dimensions. This is where you can call out slopes and grades. This is really handy for determining volumes. So this is actually based on a 3-dimensional surface of the property. And when we can calculate the square footage and how far down we're going to dig for our infiltration media, it's really easy to then get takeoffs for quantities of gravel, quantities of sand, excavation, haul away material. I tried my best to give Meg some dimensional information for like the timbers, because it's nice to know how many pieces of wood you need to buy, right? And just recognize like you can make these quantity estimations as detailed as you can, but these are natural resource projects. These are conditions that are often requiring field fit. So while you may have a good idea how many materials you're going to need, I would never encourage you to like pre-cut infiltration step timbers. It's a piece by piece, fit by fit job. So we wanted to understand like how much rain this system could take. So essentially we use the DEC bioretention calculator tool. It's a stormwater sizing tool that they put out a couple years ago. And there's a ton of different options you could have gone with this. You could just kind of simple, hand calculation in terms of volumes and pore space, but this one was handy because it's approved by DEC. So based on our like dimensions of the units or of the treatment areas, we're able to hold a total of 423 odd cubic feet of water between the 2 sets of infiltration steps and that biofiltration bed. And that allows us to say that we can manage, 0.0097 acre feet of water, which is a funny term that I only really hear on reservoirs. But essentially it's a very small amount of water. An acre foot is 1 foot deep, 1 acre in size. So you can imagine this is not that much rainwater. But our water quality volume event is really just twice that. We've got a a quarter acre drainage area, half of it's impervious, half of it's pervious. We're assuming a water quality event, 1-inch storm, 24-hour period. We looked at the soils. The map might suggest that it was Cabot silt loam, superhydric, not very hydraulically connected in terms of drainage, but that wasn't true. It's a home residential site. It's been modified a lot. The soils are really more stony, sandy loam. So we had actually better infiltration conditions than what NRCS maps would have suggested. And ultimately, we had the capacity to treat half of the water quality event. Now, this isn't ideal. You'd love to treat the water quality event, but again, this isn't a regulatory project, so there's no minimum expectation or requirement. That said, there's the potential for this project to be overwhelmed in a heavy storm. That's why we put things like, an under drain and kind of discharge points where overflow has an opportunity to, bypass the system and not do any damage. Again, there's 2 feet of gravel, 2 feet of gravel, about 8 inches of sand, and then 6 inches of topsoil, which we planted into. Porosity just gives you a sense of how much space there is in the interstitial space between those pieces of gravel. They have great permeability. It's drainage stone. It's what it's meant for. And another thing to consider is just ground table. Luckily, as you can see in that cross section, our project area is like way high above the lake level. So we didn't have any concerns about putting water on top of a water table. Again, We didn't encounter any bedrock really. It was pretty stony, pretty sandy loam, so we felt pretty good with the infiltration rates. So it's important to know that this system is not sized for any sort of major event, and so you got to be conservative in terms of providing for overflow, over designing, having some sort of factor of safety, just to keep yourself out of trouble. These are just some little close-ups, planting plans, some dimensions so that Meg and the contractor could put a little bit of a finer tune to how many materials that need to be purchased. I think it's helpful to provide these details, but again, as Meg pointed out very graciously, there's always zones of mystery in a design set. And I'll show you a few of those. When we were excavating out right at this asphalt cut, we had hired a locate service, and they had found what they thought was just a buried driveway culvert. And we're scratching our heads like, this is not where a culvert would be. So okay, but whatever. Get down there, there's just this huge I-beam under the crown of the driveway, and it's actually just a big protection for this mystery pipe. There's this green drainage pipe that's nestled in the center of the I-beam, so it doesn't get crushed by car traffic. And so we had to adapt. We're like, okay, we're not gonna mess with that. We're gonna stop our project just 6 inches short from where we wanted to, and we will make do. So you can see we're backfilling, with the drainage stone and some of the septic sand. Timber's been laid out. You can see the water is going to come off the road. The steps aren't done yet, but it'll come through this little stone energy dissipator, kind of 4-bay infiltration area, and it's actually going to go percolate into the ground and into that gravel storage area. So you can see this is after pretty big rain in July, and the only water that pooled in these beds was really just at the fringe of this soil gravel transition. So you can see a little puddle right there, but all that water from a 1-inch storm pretty much went down into the treatment system. You can see on the right, this is about where our under drain is. It's perforated pipe. It's got a little bit of a slope, and it discharges out into a vegetated area near the brook. Just provide a little bit of an overflow path. There's our planting layout. We had a lot of great plants like blue indigo, some milkweed, red osier dogwood. There, the steps are done, so you can see we kind of had to extend the steps just a little bit to make sure it's not going to get flanked right in this little tight corner, and then it kind of transitions into the infiltration, kind of a level spreader, you could think, right at the top of the project. These are the beautiful steps that Meg and her crew made. Another zone of mystery is right here. You will see that had a great entrance. Again, we had to do that little extension to make sure it didn't get flanked with runoff. She's got a lot of these rocks that they like to call gargoyles on the side to really delineate the stairs. But I hadn't really put much thought into this little step down below the house, kind of into this area where they keep the kayaks. And Meg and her crew just got really crafty and did a field fit, found a really perfect rock at their yard, brought it out there, and now we've got this beautiful little feature that keeps the stone in check, keeps the grades right, keeps water from going down the wrong direction. It's got great aesthetic. They also added these little solar caps, which I thought was a really nice touch. In terms of budget, we were really conservative on this. Anything on a lakeshore makes me nervous. Things are expensive. Neighbors get cranky. A lot of site constraints in terms of, like, sometimes you can't even get a mini excavator around the house to do the work. Sometimes you got to do a lot more work by hand because of the tight conditions, utilities, natural resources constraints. So we really did over budget intentionally, including a big contingency factor. And you can see we saved a bunch of money. We saved 10 grand ultimately in the construction cost because we just were methodical about it. We were flexible about it, and we took the precautionary steps to make sure that we didn't get ourselves in a tight situation. These lakeshore projects are always going to get more expensive than, like a green stormwater infrastructure project, or buffer planting, in terms of, particularly in terms of pounds per phosphorus or kilograms, because there's just a lot more. Hardscaping is expensive. Contractor's going to charge a premium to work in these kind of tight conditions. Somebody's going to ask for extra work, so just be aware of that on lake shores, and make sure that if there's something that makes you nervous in terms of utilities, or just kind of litigious vibes that you get from a landowner, don't put yourself in in a sticky situation and maybe call an engineering shop that has a little bit more of a robust liability coverage, because once you get into the built environment, things can be a little bit more require a little bit more caution. I think that's all I got. Oh, wait, I got some tips, which I went through a little bit. Limited access, dense development, really watch out. Try to learn your soils. The lakeshore soils are really weird. You can find like total mucks and peats, and you can find just like boulder fields. And so there's always bedrock hiding somewhere in a lakeshore around the Northeast Kingdom. So make sure you look out for that. Call dig safe, but also consider private utility locate if you think there might be other things buried in the ground, or you're getting close to the house, or you're getting close to a garage. You don't want to pull up a cable or a line that you didn't know was there. As Laura could probably testify, like get permits in early, get them into DEC Lakes and Ponds in March or February if you can. If you send a permit in June, they're going to have a hard time getting you a review in 30 days or 45 days. So make sure you try to get those in early. A lot of these practices on lake shores, it's the gunk. It's like the salt, the leaf litter, the road grit. So there is always maintenance required. Yeah, I think we're out of time. So I'm just going to close that. And if anybody's got any questions before we get kicked back into the other room, I'm happy to answer them.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. And I guess since it is 2 o'clock, we can exit this room and head back to the main room for the last breakout session.
Okay.
Thank you.